Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, the show where we bring you the politics, the pedagogy, and the practice that's happening in public education today. And as always, not running out of material yet. So it's good to be back. Second week in the saddle after the break. And we still have a little bit of chaos out in the schools. I had the fortune of hosting a principal meeting and a superintendent meeting for administrators across the state of Texas. And, you know, of course, the concerns are sobering. That is still absences. I mean, we have schools that sometimes have 70% attendance, 80% attendance. Schools are used to getting anywhere between 92 and 96%, maybe sometimes 97 if you're really on it. But this is a real issue, folks. And it's not just parents keeping their kids home. It's they've actually been exposed. They're actually sick. The COVID numbers this year compared to last year are through the roof. I think you've heard me say before that it's hard not to believe in the science of masks when all last year we had districts who wore masks. We were allowed to do that last year. And this year, because of the political football that masks became, masks were not allowed. And for those districts that had masks the year before, the first 6 weeks of no masks this school year caused them to have more kids out and staff out with COVID than all of the previous year. So I know, I talk to very kind, sincere people who want to disagree with me. All I can tell you is that that's what happened. So I suppose there wwere some schools without masks that maybe were in less risky areas. I know that at my district, we had a school in a very low socioeconomic area and then a school in not so low socioeconomic area. And the kids in the low socioeconomic area who happen to also be Hispanic, that combination, Hispanics tended to get it at a higher rate than other ethnicities. So those numbers were much higher than the one in the school 30 miles north. So again, we haven't gotten it right yet. What other concerns? Let's see, other concerns are teacher retention and recruitment. As you've heard me say, it was looming before pandemic. It's gotten worse now to the point where I am now, I've got a survey out to superintendents if they want to have me help them recruit in Puerto Rico. I have done that for the last 8 years and have found that to be a very effective recruiting place for bilingual teachers. And so we'll see if I end up having to do some shows from Puerto Rico as I help districts fill those teaching spots that are going to be left vacant because of teacher burnout. So let's see, what other things did they have concerns about? The thing that they've noticed, and I'm going to coin a new term, and that is COVID tornado. The COVID tornado is one that I saw play out in my son's home. And that is, my son has, of course, his wife was pregnant and she had COVID while pregnant and he didn't get it. And then he has a 14-year-old, a 5-year-old, and then a mother-in-law that lives with them who takes care of the kids while they're working, while my son and his wife work. And COVID came into the house, but it only impacted the 14-year-old daughter and the grandmother, my son's mother-in-law. And they're both very healthy people. My 14-year-old granddaughter is a dancer and she's very athletic and cheerleader. And and the 5-year-old who had been sick and they thought he was sick with the same thing actually ended up not having it, testing negative. And my son still hasn't had it. So, and I haven't had it. My husband, who is a little bit delicate, has had cancer a couple of times. He hasn't had corona. So goodness gracious, you just don't know. And yet what I can say, and I polled the superintendents, I said, is there anybody here who can tell me that you don't know somebody, not a loved one or a friend, who doesn't currently have the virus. No hands went up. So it's just everywhere. We hope that it peaks really soon. I heard January 26th was a peaking date possibility. So let's hope for that. Now, this article caught my eye because, as you know, I'm always trying to get to where we can find some positives out of this pandemic. 3 years, school years, right? I know it'll be 2 years in March, but it will have impacted 3 school years. And so the pandemic changed American education overnight. Some changes are here to stay. So let's see what we see. And I want you to be thinking about this as I talk about it. What when I talk, what do you hear that maybe you're seeing play out in your kids' schools? All right. So let's see. And here's a good one right on the front page of the article. A teacher provides an outdoor learning demonstration for New York City schools in front of Patrick Daly schools in Brooklyn last September. Creative models for outdoor learning are one change that may have staying power after the pandemic. And I know that I was very insistent last year of, if the kids could eat outside, let them eat outside. Let's not coop them up in the classroom. They couldn't be in the cafeteria. Okay, well, let's eat outside. It's better air. It was a little bit new then and novel for the kids, more interesting. So we did have that outside. So let's see what things this author thinks is going to be normal now. And I'm going to read the promo because this article isn't that old. It's 2-3 months old, but it still is speaking as if it's now, because this is still happening. Schools and parents are still burdened by COVID-19 cases, contact tracing and quarantines. Remote learning has returned in some cases, and others, kids are back to sitting at home without work. In others, unlike last year, most classrooms are open, but they operate among shifting health recommendations and frequent fights over masks and vaccine mandates. And we talked about that political football that schools have become. So when will school be normal again? Many educators thought that was going to be this past fall. That didn't turn out. Now they're saying maybe never. And Paul Revere, a professor at Harvard University who directs the Education Redesign Lab, says normal shouldn't be what we used to have, because what we used to have was inadequate. Disadvantaged students suffered the most in schools plagued by inertia and caution, he said. Wealthier students were more likely to have support outside of school, including resources to buy reliable internet. And they were able to participate in enriching after-school activities that aided their educational and social growth. They go skiing, they go to summer camps and so forth. But he said schools have seen some terrific adaptation during the pandemic that previously we would have been unwilling to embrace. Experts said some of the 2020 spurred jolts to the system will stick permanently, thrusting education into a more personalized, modernized, responsive space that sets up more students for success through high school and beyond. And isn't that why we're in the business, right? So what's the first one? More tech-driven classes. Why do most classrooms look the same as they did a century ago, with desks and rows and a teacher lecturing? That observation had been repeated for years. And it took a pandemic to finally change it. Almost every kid got a tablet or a laptop plus an internet connection, although there are still shortages, but mostly in the rural areas. And there's getting better. There's lots of work being done in helping rural schools catch up. Some schools jettisoned virtual learning in favor of in-person instruction this year. Others blended aspects of virtual learning with traditional instruction. Confident in the ability of teachers and students to pivot quickly to remote learning at home, some districts ended snow days and kept kids learning even in the face of natural disasters such as hurricanes, fires that would have shuttered buildings. And that's true in my daughter's case. My daughter lives in Kentucky, and they have snow and had snow this past week. And so they sent the kids and the staff home for online learning during the snow days. Now, interestingly enough, they're home for snow days. They were home Thursday and Friday, but those were normal snow days because they only have and are allowed 10 online days during the school year. So they're having to be cautious in using them all up, during the first part of winter. So, but again, what was interesting to me, and I brought this up to the superintendents who really sort of envied what I said, and that is that in Kentucky, there's not the political arena and the discourse and the negativity and the back and forth about blended learning and in-school learning and mask mandates and so forth. They have to wear masks, and they just do. And so it is what it is. And we go on and we go to school when we can and do online learning. And there's not the political feel to schooling, that hybrid work that they're doing up there in Kentucky like there is down here. And those superintendents envy that. Other districts aiming to meet the needs of students who thrive virtually created options for students to continue learning online this year. And, I know that, and I've said it, I will say it again, kids need to be in school. And that would be like 99% of them, because that's where they learn best. But you do have a small percentage of kids who do better at home. And some districts are actually responding to that. In Florida, Miami-Dade County Public Schools launched Miami-Dade Virtual School for parents who wanted their children to continue learning virtually. And now they did change it. It's got more structure, more oversight, live instruction than previous year. Because, the previous year was still a sort of a continuation of the March 19th, get through the rest of that school year, fly the plane while building it, sort of remote learning. Now, and even that continued into then the 2021. Now we're at 21-22, and we're getting better at it. I'll be bringing articles. I'm already starting to see articles about how virtual learning lessons are being used to get more sophisticated and more effective in the use of online learning. Because in some states, it may not feel like it, but online learning and that blend of it is here to stay. Some states will embrace it faster. Some states won't make it a political football and will learn how to manage online learning as a tool in their arsenal. So if there's anything we've learned in the past year and a half, it's that flexibility needs to be part of our toolbox, said Superintendent Alberto Calvo. Virtual learning needs major improvements, experts said. On average nationwide, and we've heard this, you've heard me say this, students learned online, they lost more ground in math and reading compared with kids who spent the time learning in person, right? 55% of parents with school-age children said online or distance learning caused their child to fall behind, and that's according to a national USA Today poll. Chris Dede, a professor at Harvard who studies how learning happens alongside technology, said online school works better for some students and subjects than others. And see, here's that learning piece. Research must catch up with what styles of online instruction works best and how much time to spend on live learning versus independent or remote group learning. Ideally, all teachers will continue to teach in a blended manner, and going online won't be dictated only by necessity or disaster. So another thing that's going to change and is changing, blowing up traditional school schedules. More schools are changing long-held schedules to better accommodate students and promote more steady academic attention. Michigan, for example, allowed schools to adopt a year-round program, which really would be best for all school districts. But the tourist industry and some parents with sort of old-fashioned ideas about kids need their summer off thing has kept that from happening. But continual learning is best for kids. And if you had that schedule in place where you had year-round school with maybe every 9 weeks, you'd have 3 weeks off, and you do that 3 times a year. And so you don't have the huge gaps. You don't have 2 months off. And that really hurts reading levels. It hurts the remembering skills when you come back. It just, and the research is out there. It clearly says we should do year-round school, but I'm not going to win that one by myself. I need everybody's help for that. Public schools in Des Moines, Iowa added learning time over lunch to make up for lost hours of in-person instruction. More schools in Wisconsin requested state approval to start early this year because it's odd in Texas. In Texas, we are allowed to start school by the third week in August, and some schools can even start even earlier. If your school that has applied for and gotten a School of Innovation status, you can start your school, the first or second week of August. So a lot of states, though, are still in that mode of starting school after Labor Day. So some schools experimented with entirely new schedules to help school juggle education and work responsibilities. Because, like, for example, in Massachusetts, Phoenix Charter Academy Network is designed to help disadvantaged youth complete their high school studies. Some students are parents themselves and half live in unstable housing. So the CEO of this charter network is Beth Anderson, and she says many students disengaged during the virtual learning last year because they took on full-time jobs. And I saw that in my district. We had especially our juniors and seniors who started working. The parents are hardworking folks and they didn't like seeing their able-bodied child at home. So they sent them off to work or encouraged them to work. And when it was time to go back to school, it was tough to get them away from work because the kids liked having that money coming in. Oftentimes they helped with costs at home. So this charter network had to take that into consideration. So they changed their schedule. And instead of going all day, they now have 2 tracks. You can come from 8 to 2 or from noon to 6. And some come a few days a week or even Saturday in addition to completing work online. So she says the pandemic allowed them to open up scheduling differently. And after the pandemic, they realized, and this is a huge piece, you don't often hear school adults say this, we had to figure out how to build schools around kids. How to do school with what was best for children. More online learning pods and micro and homeschool. So historically, about 90% of children attend public schools. The pandemic compelled many parents to try less traditional options, and some are sticking with them. About 13% of parents nationwide have a child in private school, which could be religious, could be non-religious, or an online program. And 6% have children in charter schools, which are publicly funded but privately managed. 4% said their child was in a non-traditional program. So parents have told researchers that they want schooling options that are more personalized and less bureaucratic, said Robin Lake, director of the Center on Reinventing Public Education, which is a research group in Washington, University of Washington. Many parents of color who choose online schooling pods or homeschooling wanted an experience focused on racial affirmation. A lot of them said they wanted to try this for a long time, but they were scared. Would that kind of education hurt their kids' chances, in college applications? Could they manage their time? So the pandemic sort of allowed them to make that choice. And so Embark Education, which is a Denver middle school, also has a very interesting project-based learning environment. It teaches academics through the operation of a bike shop and cafe. It launched it in 2019 and only has about 30 students. And on an afternoon in August, about 10 of the micro schools students wrote fractions and math formulas to figure out an order of burgers, buns, and condiments. In another room, students learned the science and proportions of ingredients necessary to make a latte. Kids themselves decide when to schedule their hours assisting at the cafe or the bike shop. We all like the more personalized learning and attention we get from teachers, said Olive Randall, who is 12. So these micro schools that are schools within schools, right, can really make school more relevant for kids. And certainly we've seen lots of project-based learning schools pop up, but they're not institutionalized yet. And what I mean by that, it's not a go-to yet for all schools, and it should be, because project-based learning makes learning relevant to kids, and you're more apt to want to learn it, not forget it, score better on college tests. Just it's all connected. And kids of color and from poverty tend to do really well in those environments. So number 3, schools finally connected with parents. Teachers and principals have long struggled to develop relationships with parents, particularly those challenged by poverty. Virtual learning finally provided a consistent link between home and school. Many parents found themselves listening to their child's teacher every day, which helped them understand what the teachers were asking their kids to do. Connecticut's Hartford Public Schools adopted Zearn, an online math program designed to bring parents into the process of learning. We're moving beyond encouraging parents to ask, did you do your homework? To having them more specifically ask their kids, how did you solve that problem? Can you justify your solution? So, wouldn't that be fantastic? And are you ready for that, parent? Teachers spend a lot more time explaining how students are learning math to parents these days, and that may be unusual, but what they're finding is that's successful for them. Now, what I can say, though, about relationships with parents is we've also evolved into parents who have lots of strong opinions about things like mask mandates, vaccine mandates, now textbooks, CRT. And so there's another side to what's happening with parents that we're still learning to manage, as far as the schools being able to be honest with parents and be better listeners for parents. So that's happening slowly, but we've talked about the fact that school boards and superintendents have pretty much not been questioned much over the many years that they've been around. And now all of a sudden you have parents lining up to speak on topics, and sometimes they're pretty intense about it. And school boards and superintendents have sometimes acted in an arrogant way back, and that just fuels the fire. So having to learn to listen to different ideas in a constructive way is now being part of a school board and superintendent's life. That's a good thing. And here's another: prioritizing student social and mental health needs. Now, you and I know that after 2 years of pandemic living and dying, the issue of students' mental health has been thrust to the forefront of schooling, right? And schooling concerns. More than 1 in 4 parents, 28%, said their children's biggest struggle during the pandemic was mental health. 37% said making and maintaining friendships was their biggest struggle. Well, of course, when you couldn't leave the house. Nearly all teachers said social and emotional learning helps students manage emotional distress and reduces behavior problems, according to a survey by McGraw-Hill, who is a textbook company. More than half of those teachers said their school began implementing a social emotional learning plan. And again, I'm hoping you're listening with, did that happen at my school? In general, those plans help students develop a healthy sense of self, manage emotions, reduce loneliness, gain empathy, and maintain supportive relationships. And don't we need more kids to learn that and take that into adulthood, right? Education Secretary, our federal education secretary, Miguel Cardona, said the habits schools and teachers are developing to address mental health needs have staying power. The best habits require a fundamental shift in how the school day operates, he said. Does the school day look different? And Cardona was asking that in a USA Today interview. Students, he said, need to know, are there activities that engage me with my peers, where I can talk and learn communication skills and express whether I'm feeling upset about something, or be able to develop coping strategies? Do we have that? Do you have that in your school? The next one is less focus on testing. In some states, maybe not in Texas necessarily yet, but the pandemic meant a pause in required standardized tests, which are usually administered in person. Teachers have long complained that testing reduces actual teaching time. We've been dangerously out of balance when it comes to our emphasis on test scores and about physical health and mental health, said Andrew Ho, a Harvard professor and director of the National Council on the Measurement in Education. So federal law requires school districts to administer yearly exams in key subjects in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school, but states were given more flexibility this spring to administer those exams. In Florida, officials proposed an assessment and accountability regime that would reduce the amount of time spent on testing. Governor Ron DeSantis said the state will move towards using online adaptive tests issued 3 times a year to measure student progress and hold schools accountable. And that's the right way to test, folks. You teach a little, test a little, teach a little, test a little, and then you look for progress along the way. That I'm hoping that we can get more states moving in that direction. That sounds really good. There needs to be also a de-emphasis on punishing schools that don't have good test scores, especially after the last 2 years. I mean, and unfortunately in Texas, there's still a gotcha for those test scores. Even with, and Texas was very supportive in the beginning, very, very supportive. You heard me say very many good things about the Commissioner of Education and just all the support that superintendents were getting. But now we're back to the emphasis on test scores, and they are going to online testing in 2023 in Texas. So that's also coming. And some school districts worry about that, especially the rural ones who don't necessarily have strong internet and enough devices yet. More mentoring and tutoring programs. We certainly have seen that caused by the pandemic, and we're going to need to continue that because you can't catch kids up. If we have kids 2, 3, 4 years behind, you can't catch them up in a year or two. Frankly, it takes up to 4 years sometimes. I've heard the Commissioner of Education in Texas say that. High dosage personalized tutoring programs boost test scores in reading and math, especially for low income students. So this is according to a Danish study posted on the ResearchGate website. As a result, they've been touted as a way to help students make up pandemic related academic losses. And students who lost the most ground are disproportionately children of color and low income. So it'll take more time to measure the results of those programs once they're rolled out on a larger scale. The schools have sought outside help in the form of mentorships to help students progress academically, emotionally, and professionally. So when kids, and I saw this was happening in 1990 to 95 at an elementary school in Plano where I was teaching. They had a partnership with EDS at the time, and every single one of those kids got a mentor from EDS, and there was a very strong commitment. There was a banquet that we would go to once a year. We would honor special mentors and kids every year, and those kids had the same mentor all the way through school, not just elementary. And that mentor's responsibility was to make sure that he or she gave good guidance as far as life choices, because oftentimes the kids, especially the elementary where I was, almost 100% Hispanic, low socioeconomic, and immigrant parents, very little college in parents. So guiding kids to think about college as a option, or vocational school or military, and planting that seed and keeping that seed fertilized in the brain was that mentor's job. That's so can't have enough of that. It can't be a one shot. It's gotta be ongoing, folks. That was an excellent program. It was too bad the partnership eventually over several years it went away. And the last thing is richer out of school activities. During the remote and hybrid schooling, millions of students spent less time in formal class every day, and that exacerbated the experience gap between wealthy kids and not so wealthy kids, which contributes to the achievement differences, according to research by Engage to Learn, an educational service company. As schools struggle to serve student needs, community-based organizations, nonprofits, and private groups filled the gap. One technology company, Reconstruction, launched in September 2020, they offer an unapologetically Black education to students at home through virtual lessons taught by experts vetted by the company. Classes are $10 each, targeted to specific grade levels plus adults, and focus on everything from cooking Black cuisine to reading Black authors to using applied math to explore Black liberation, wealth, and innovation. Families say they love the content because their child isn't getting it in school. They love the tutor and they like meeting other kids around the country, said Reconstruction CEO Kaya Henderson, former chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools. Many Black students don't have options for out of school activities that are culturally relevant, she said. So hosting classes online allows kids from different parts of the country to converse with each other and allows Reconstruction to hire professionals with expertise in specific subjects, no matter where they live. When kids see themselves represented in the curriculum, they're more engaged. I mean, that, and we know that, right? But again, schools are bogged down by the heavy curriculums that they have. They're bogged down by all that they are supposed to teach to test. And so we don't often pay attention to the culturally responsive curriculum that we need to have for kids. Wow. Well, as always, we are out of time. Thank you for letting me spend a little bit of time with you today. And I hope that, again, you listened with the focus of, is any of that happening in my schools? Go ahead and, if you would take a minute to write in the chat, if you're already seeing that play out, some of these new innovations in your child's school, that would be nice. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you again next week. Take care.